Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. Today in episode 183, I'm very happy to bring on my first-time guest, Adam Gell. Adam Gell is a shamanic mentor and certified Akashic record reader who specializes in helping his clients recognize traumas, setbacks, and obstacles. And through various healing modalities, he assists them to better understand a path to a more fulfilling and balanced life. Having overcome life-altering losses and physical traumas himself, he has traveled the path of learning to go inward and develop adaptability and resiliency so he could step up to serve others. Adam had the willingness to become a blended version of all his parts, including the masculine and the feminine, developing his intuition and his ability to heal and to become his gift to the world. Because all parts of a story are worthwhile and create the whole, Adam worked as a physical education teacher in Brooklyn, New York for over 30 years. He was also a Division I baseball player and an adjunct professor of health and nutrition. The production of his film, Forgotten, brought a deep level of ancestral healing and understanding of how Adam relates to his present, past, and future. Forgotten, played throughout the film festival circuit in 2018, garnishing great reviews and professional accolades. You can watch it on YouTube, and the link is below in the description. Adam also hosts Conversations with Adam Gell and Inspiring Minds, where he interviews amazing healers and transformers throughout the world every week. He is a professional photographer, writer, and world traveler. Adam finds joy in his family, his work, and his mission to assist people on their own journeys toward self-discovery and fulfillment. All of the links are below in the description box. Today in episode 183, we will discuss the subject of Adam's documentary and path to healing. Thank you for subscribing. Leave me a comment and please do smash that like button. And so without further ado, Adam, welcome to the Quantum Guide Show. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much for having me, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. I am so excited to talk about your documentary. Now, a lot of people make documentaries, but I got to tell you, yours really touched my heart. In fact, I had Kleenex crying through the whole documentary because it was so real and so insightful, and it brought up so many things from me. So, I just want to give you a couple minutes maybe to talk about your documentary, anything you want people to know, and then I want to get into why I wanted to feature it on the show today.
Well, in terms of the documentary itself, it was a long undertaking, not in terms of the film itself, the relationship that I shared with my grandmother. And as we know, we go through different aspects of our lives where we experience different traumas and setbacks. And sometimes many people deal with those setbacks alone, and others have the fortunate opportunity to have someone in their lives, a relative, a person close by, a guardian, whatever it may be, that can share or give them the unconditional love that they would never normally not receive from others. And for me, growing up in Brooklyn, it was an interesting background in terms of how I grew up, playing different sports amongst different types of different kids. And for me, it was in my house, I grew up with parents who aren't involved, so to speak. And I guess, as they say, we come into the world and we learn a specific lesson. We choose our parents. And I guess I chose my parents in terms of giving me the friction or the resistance I needed in order to go forward and move forward in my life, or would at least have this connection with my grandmother. So living a few blocks away, I would go to my grandmother's house and just, see her history. And as a 7-year-old, not knowing where the pictures were from, who the people were, and the people look different, It was a clash of cultures for me living in America and seeing these people who lived in Russia. And yeah, one thing just led to another of me opening up and trying to find the person in the photo she initially showed me, which was my biological father. And she was pushing this agenda forward, even through my father when they were in the displaced camps in Europe after World War II. But he wanted no part of it because it was confusing to him. He was traumatized enough. What's interesting is that as a child growing up until my teenage years, college years, I was trying to forge a relationship with him, but everything seemed to not work in its favor until I did this film, where it kind of opened up different channels of connection from our ancestral lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just the path itself of traveling and seeking and keeping the memories alive. In other words, as human beings, we suffer the slings and arrows in our lives, and then will we be remembered? Who will remember us? What do we have to do to be remembered? Because after all, we're on an inner journey, a soul's path, but we also interact with the external environment around us and our children and relatives. And of course, we want recognition and we want to be remembered. So for me, going through a divorce and not having contact with my children brought me to the realization that there are people who never have a relationship with their siblings or their children, and then nobody knows anything. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I looked at my grandfather's photo as a 7-year-old, and my grandmother turned her back to me and didn't tell me who it was specifically, but I wanted to know who it was, that stored in the back of my mind. And she planted a
Mm-hmm.
seed to me to, 40 years later, go on a journey to find this person. Um, and, and I did. And
Mm-hmm.
it was
Wonderful.
yeah.
So the thing that really, well, two things that really struck me while watching your documentary. One was, thank God your grandmother kept a diary or a journal, and the way she expressed herself was, I'm going to cry just talking about it, was so beautiful and so true and so unapologetic, just raw, but absolutely what she was going through. And then the way you did the voice overlay with somebody obviously reading what your grandmother had said in her diary, it was so beautiful. It just reminded me of a time where people loved in a way that we don't often see today, at least not in North America. Not I live in Canada, you live in the United States. Our cultures are quite similar. And we don't see that kind of love and dedication that's deep to the core, the way we saw your grandmother and her experiences losing her husband during the war and her life as it spiraled on after that. And it was just so beautiful. It was so touching. I mean, you can watch documentaries all the time, and they kind of affect us on a mental level and our understanding. But yours really touched my heart. I really recommend those of you who are listening to this podcast or watching it, please do go and watch the documentary. It is well worth every moment. It's just so beautifully and professionally done, Adam. Just, it was fantastic. And I'll let you address that if you want to, but I also wanted to say part of who we are today is what our ancestors went through. And many of us, I know for myself, um, my maternal grandfather, he was 17 and my grandmother was 14 and when they got married, and then he got called off to World War One. And the impact that it had on them and their children, being our parents and our aunts and uncles, and yet nobody, at least in my family, people didn't talk about it. Grandpa didn't talk about what he had been through. And my uncles who were away in World War II didn't talk about what they went through, but the trauma was still there. And I think this trauma gets embedded in families. And those of us today who are searching for ourselves, for our sanity, for our spirituality, for our mental health, we don't always realize that trauma, and also, a bit of dysfunctional goings on because of things not being brought out or talked about. And I'm not saying they were right or wrong. I'm just saying that's sort of how it was, and how that has a carryover to us and perhaps adds to our deep sense of loneliness and problems that we're having today. But it's not often talked about how what our grandparents, great grandparents, uncles, aunts, parents went through has a direct effect on us mentally and spiritually and emotionally. Anyway,
Yeah.
I've said quite a bit here. I guess I'll just stop and let you interject. I don't know if you have anything you want to say about your grandmother and the beautiful legacy she left you in her diary with expressing herself so beautifully.
Yeah, well, just on a point you touched a little bit before that is in terms of the traumas that are passed down and the things that are unseen that we don't know what we're feeling at a specific time in our life, and many of the issues we feel are not ours, and many of them belong to the unresolved issues from past generations. From my perspective, growing up in my house, as I unraveled the story from my father and experiencing and seeing his traumas and voicing exactly the things he experienced, I then got to see the way he treated me as a child, and I could line up the exact behaviors that he received from his father or what he experienced
Mhm.
to what I experienced as a child, whether it be the way I was treated by my sister and how, the sibling relationship between my sister and I, and the streets, friends, and how my father did certain things that then mirrored the way he's treated as a stepson to his non-biological father. And so in
Mhm.
some aspects, my father treated me as the non-biological son the way he was treated, and treated my sister as the way he wanted to be treated. And so there was a
Mhm.
big discrepancy in my house of not understanding this, but knowing through my intuition that it wasn't me. It had to be something he experienced that he didn't share. So throughout my life, I'd question him. I'd say, "Oh, could you tell me about what it was like to be in Europe or in the DP camps, or and what it was like leaving Russia and traveling by train and sneaking out, when the soldiers were in the middle of the night." And he had certain memories. He had two or three memories, and he was 11 years old, and that's about it. And so I knew I didn't understand at the time what trauma he experienced, because my own relationship in the house superseded anything from his past, but it was still lurking under the surface. And even if I
Mhm.
was struggling, I was still looking to pull up those roots and try to find uh, what was happening, and then the story. And as you to the second part, as you speak about my grandmother was a very sentimental, sensitive individual who appeared tough on the outside to shield her sensitivity, and the rest of the family used that as a way of distancing themselves from true unconditional love, which was it was a firmness but with boundaries, and it was just love that was unconditional for me. And it actually irritated my parents because they didn't know how to do what she was doing, and they didn't see that they didn't create this relationship. So my grandmother and I, in terms of finding the diaries themselves, um, for me, they weren't exposed. They weren't given to me. I found them at the very bottom of her photo albums when she passed away. And that was a big joy. And it was a very sentimental moment for me to then, through her photo albums, after she passed away, I looked at them 9 years later, because through my divorce separation with my children, it was hard for me to go back to that part. But yet again, when I was able to settle those issues, then the comforting part was for me to reconnect again with my grandmother's story. So 9 years after she passed away, I went in my mother's basement, found the photo albums that she showed me as a child. And then after I looked at those, I found underneath in plastic bags were diaries in different years where she was, where she was residing. And then they weren't in a native language. They were from Harkomi language, which is an indigenous language in the Russian Republic, the far north. And so when I showed them to coworkers who spoke Russian, they said, "This is not Russian. I can't translate this." And I said, "What do you mean?" And then I remembered she spoke a Komi language, which had used the Cyrillic letters, but different meanings and different words. And so I had to basically take the diaries themselves. And what I did was I went through her letters that she saved from the 1950s all the way up to 2000. She had 60 years, or I mean, yeah, she had some 50 years of letters from her family. And I picked the most recent letter that she received in 2000 before she passed away. And this was 2009. And I wrote a letter on the computer, translated it. I sent it off. And it happened to be her niece, who was in her 80s, who still spoke the Komi language. And so I wrote her if she would be willing to, translate the diaries, into Russian. And then I'd have them translated into English.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what happened. And so I received them, and I couldn't believe the words and the creativity that she expressed herself in is exactly how you said it. There was a deep sense of passion, and a deep sense of love that she shared, but also a deep sense of tragedy that she experienced. And these diaries wound up going from Russia when she was 18 years old all the way till she came to Brooklyn in 1953, when she was still married to her present my non-biological grandfather, and still writing, I wonder where your body is. I wonder if I can collect all my tears, a river would flow to you. And when I read that, I said, I have to find him. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so yeah, that was the impetus was the love my grandmother gave me, and I felt she planted a seed in me, and I knew subconsciously she wanted me to find him. Because everything pointed in that direction, the photos, the diaries, just the whole journey itself was an awakening towards a person that I felt was like in my energy field, helping me heal my grandfather, the person I found. I could feel his presence in terms of working with my healing work and calling upon him and adding him as an ancestor or as a healing guide for me. And yeah, it was an incredible journey for me to show also my children that I connected with somebody that wasn't alive, but I brought him to life. And then we don't have to, we really die when we're forgotten, when our memory is no longer kept alive. And that's the tragedy. And so when we don't look at people's photos and we don't know the name of who the people in the photo album are, or we don't know what they did for a living. And then you get a lot of people who I've asked in my family, who's that? I don't know. I don't know. And to me, that's a tragedy, because that could be one of us in the photo. And we were begging and calling out somebody to please recognize that what we went through wasn't for naught. And not that everybody suffers, but we have our ups and downs, obviously, and it's important to remember. It's important to remember and to dedicate some of our time, I think, and I guess prayer to our ancestors, to remembering them. For what they did to bring us to this present moment, even if it wasn't the greatest. Yeah.
I also believe they live through us. Their genetics, our genetics, are parts of their genetics, and they actually live through us. And I think it's a really important connection. It was also really touching to see, the honesty of your father on camera. It was really beautiful to see, and his confusion, because he couldn't understand how his mother loved his birth father, even though she had remarried, and his stepfather, who, I'm from a step-parent family too, so your stepfather sort of becomes your father when your father's not around anymore, right? And it was confusing to him, and it was confusing to him his lack of connection, with the stepfather. And then that carried down to you. But now, because you went back and reconnected with your grandfather, and you helped show your father a new perspective, and to see him basically, it's just so emotional, break down to tears as he realized, understood his mother in a new way, understood his birth father in a new way, understood his stepfather in a new way, and then that opened up the field to have a new relationship with you. And what a beautiful gift you gave to your family and yourself, to
Yeah.
do all that. And that was not easy work for any of you. So it was very inspirational. And again, we don't always realize that some of the challenges that we're going through in our lives here and now were the seeds were planted in our grandparents. So, for instance, my grandfather, he was in World War I, and he participated in World War II, but he didn't leave Canada. He worked here in the military here. My uncles who went over, what they experienced while they were in the war arena, no one talked about it, but when they came back, they were all changed, and it put terrific strains on their family. My Uncle Joe, who was shot in the stomach, ended up developing stomach cancer and dying of stomach cancer. It was just so much was not talked about. And it was almost like, well, the war's over. I was born only less than, well, I was born 1956. So I was like around, I guess, 11 years after World War II ended, which is not that long, really. And my mom, she threw herself into the fantasy that was then given to people. So not only was there the intergenerational trauma that was not talked about, and so it didn't get processed. Then there was, at least in Canada, I think it was very much like that in the United States, where they introduced a whole new culture to the citizens. Like, I'll give you an example. A lot of the women were in the workforce while the men were away at war. Afterwards, the government came up with plans on ways to get women out of the workforce, so they moved them into the suburbs, and the whole cult of the domestic ideal for womanhood and cleaning and learning how to make casseroles and on and on and on, and consumer products. And that's when processed food and all kinds of overuse of sugars and all this crap, came in, and it kept our mothers very, very busy trying to live up to this ideal, while the fathers were busy trying to integrate themselves into the workforce. I know I'm sort of going off topic, but it is all related. And my mother was very heavily influenced by Hollywood and all the movies that came out during the war. That she was like around 10 years old during the war. And, her brothers and sisters took her to the movies, and she got her head filled with all kinds of ideas that have nothing to do with being human, or especially being fully human. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Adam. And so all of this set the stage for those of us today to have all kinds of disconnects and disconnections and dysfunctional ways of dealing with things. And so it takes a great deal of courage and energy to get back on track and to recognize. And so I think that the trauma of, like, my grandfather, World War I, my uncles, World War II, that also is sort of somehow infused into family cultures and into ways of being, that if it doesn't get addressed and looked at, it just sort of festers underneath everything else. I don't know. Do you think I'm on track, or what have you got to say, Adam? I didn't mean to talk for this
No,
long.
I
I'm trying
no,
to
I
make my
agree with you. Yeah, I think that things are passed down without being that when things are not validated or looked into. I think they get become suppressed, and I think they pass it on to the next generation to deal with. And in my case, both my parents were perfect for each other because they were looking to have a support system within themselves to protect themselves from dealing with any truth or reality.
Mhm.
And here I came along and asked questions, and I was curious about what they experienced, and they didn't really want to shed any light on it. But for me, it was important that I did that, and it brought me, as you know, as we've said, in terms of the documentary, but more so my life itself. It's brought me the desire to reveal and to shine the light on things that are hidden,
Mhm.
and that's an important part for me. in terms of figuring things out and exposing things that, you know, would be my children, you know, when we live amongst people who deny things, it creates a greater stress sometimes than when the truth is revealed. You know, holding back a dam of water is a lot more work than to just let the water flow through. And for me, it was important that I not only did the film, but that I have relationships with people where I ask them, because I asked myself to shine a light on myself, to have them do the same thing. And when that happens, it brings me a greater sense of satisfaction. It may create some stress or tension, but it helps me, and I think it helps them in the long run. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, do you see a connection, Adam, between suppressing what we don't want to talk about or recognize or feel and the abundance of addictions that we're seeing today? Do you see a connection?
I would say so, because there are ways people numb themselves from their feelings. People don't want to feel, and so people are numbing themselves up with, you know, social media, numbing themselves up with different drugs, I guess, recreational drugs, alcohol, and creating tensions and distractions in society as a means of not really dealing with the narcissist energy that could exist in a family that we sometimes either carry over or we confront. Yeah.
One of the viewers just posted in the chat, Oracle Eyes asks, how do we identify what is our and what is an ancestral trauma or issue?
That's a good question. I think when we do the work and we realize that we've come to an end in understanding that we've done not as much as we can, but we've shined a light on our own issues of who we are and what we've experienced, what we've done right, what we've done wrong. And then we still have this energy lurking in the background. Then we can, you know, call in our energy, the spirit guides, to ask us for information and to see what, you know, who's lurking and what energy. In terms of, it also shows up on our physical body. You know, the left side is the feminine, the right side is the masculine. It comes in the form of people. It comes in the form of past lives and interactions and dreams. But as it relates to doing the work for ourselves, of knowing and taking ownership for our own issues of what we've done right and wrong, and then with something else is still lurking in our energy field, then we can go back and look into that. In terms of the work I do, it was a pendulum work of asking questions and receiving answers. Out of that subconscious information comes through, it's passed through to whether it's the present life, it's the past life, or it's ancestral work that needs to be done. So as it answers that question, that's usually how I work it.
Now, I would like to just take a very short a break to play a promotional video. It's 2 minutes long, and then we'll come back. And when we come back, Adam, I want to get into how you assist people with their traumas, and I want to talk a bit about the different videos that you make, which I have found very very not just encouraging, but actually very liberating. I want to talk a bit about that. So we'll just take a very, very short pause here, and then when we come back, let's delve into that.
Okay.
Hi guys, break time for a short message. YouTube will not monetize me, so if you enjoy my content and want to support my efforts, help me to cover my expenses by visiting my shop to buy yourself a beautiful orgone generator. Zendome's Orgonite are my unique brand, and they are ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. They are only available through my website, www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. Many people are finding comfort with Zendome's orgone generators, commonly called Orgonite. They are a simple compound which balance ambient energy by converting negative energy and EMF into positive healing energy with many easily confirmed health benefits. They are a simple compound with alchemic and energetic properties. These devices function as self-driven, continuously operating, highly efficient, negative to positive energy transmutation factories. They help diminish the harmful effects of electromagnetic frequency radiation by attracting and converting negative energies, retuning them into new and more healthful sound and light wave patterns. And they help to purify the atmosphere and accelerate plant growth. They also help stimulate positive mood and are a natural remedy for poor sleep patterns. When orgonite is within range of any corded or wireless electronic device, it will efficiently and continuously transform that energy into orgone as it is being transmitted. This essentially creates orgone energy transmitters out of any and all emitters of harmful negative energy. You can use these devices for focusing the mind, healing, meditation, and for spiritual growth. Zendome's Orgonite are my unique brand of orgone generators, and they are only available through my website. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out my website to see my latest selection at www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. That's KarenHolton healthcoach.com. Check them out today. Now, let's get back to the show. And we're back. So,
Okay.
yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about what you do. So, for instance, the shamanic work you've done, I've watched several of your videos, Adam, where you take us through a guided meditation with a purpose. And often, or usually, you are using your drum, you're doing drumming. And I find that drumming has a very soothing way of getting the visualization into my body. So I'm actually somatizing the visualization exercise that you're leading my mind through the drumming. So it is a very user-friendly interface, and I just absolutely love your guided meditations. So I'm wondering if you want to tell us a little bit about that and also the other work that you do.
Yeah, okay. Touch upon shamanic drumming, which I meet every Tuesday evening at 7:30 or 8 o'clock on my YouTube live channel. In terms of the shamanic drumming, I studied under a man by the name of Itzhak Berry, who was a shaman in New York City. Traveling the path of doing that inner work brought me to that modality of healing and connecting to, the spirit world and spirit animals. And so for me, it's very important because I come across different animals in my life as synchronicities and passing images and messages to me. So I try to offer people the opportunity, as you mentioned, to sit in a drumming session and relax the brain waves and to get into a state of mind where we receive information from the spirit realm. And so that's my intention. My intention is to assist people to open up to the things that our imagination presents. And that's usually information that we can connect to and receives, solid information that helps us or guides us on our path. The other thing I do is I do Akashic record readings, and the Akashic record readings are reading a person's soul's, plan print from the beginning of time. And usually whatever information is relevant based upon the questions a client asks, in terms of a higher frequency, will usually reveal information that helps a person evolve, look back in their past lives, present life, or their future possibilities. And connecting to the Akashic records is receiving information from the astral plane, from the fifth dimension. And in terms of our actions in life, the things we've done in our life are all reverberate to this energy field. And through a specific prayer, I read the person's records and I get information that I retrieve holographically, auditory, and pass it on to a person. And so it usually helps a person see things clearer, It confirms many things people already know about themselves, but when the subconscious is brought to the conscious, it helps a person then, we're always distracting ourselves, looking for ways of not really meeting our unconscious mind. I think, as Carl Jung said. And so for me, that's what I do. I do that kind of work. I also do shamanic work in terms of Olympia, where I clear a person's energy field, clearing out the energy, different chakra systems, using an egg to clear off the energy, which absorbs the negative energy itself, rebalancing the chakra system and helping a person restore connection to their soul. And I also do soul prints. Soul prints is reading a person's fingerprints. Each one of us has a different set of fingerprints, but we all belong to a specific school. We belong to the school of love, peace, wisdom, or service. And based upon the road we travel and the adversities we face, those are actually the things that will shape us into the school we're supposed to be involved in and graduate from. And so when a person sends their fingerprints, I analyze the 10 fingerprints, and they're always related to a school, a lesson, and how a person can evolve and graduate, so to speak, from that school itself. And yeah, for me, it's been very interesting in terms of the Akashic Records, because I started off getting a reading myself, which confirmed the past life that I had, and met people in this life who remember me from a past life, which is not uncommon for people who've traveled the work of doing soul work, and knowing a soul person once they're in their company, or feeling something that they have in common. But for me, it was interesting because off the subject of the work I do, I'll just elaborate on the Akashic Records itself for a second. I as a phys ed teacher in my gym, I would look up at the ceiling of the gym and get panic attacks looking at the gym, see at the vents. At that point, I had developed asthma, but I also had Lyme disease, so it was a combination of many things. With that in mind, every time the heat was on, I would see the cloth that was attached to the vent in the gym, and I would get panicky, and I would tell the custodian if he could just please shut the heat off. And he asked me why. I said, just if you could just do it. And he did. I knew that was something off because I was getting panicked over something that wasn't really a realistic situation. One of the workers that I worked with, she said to me, I have a friend that, maybe can help you. So I didn't know exactly what she meant. But I had done a little holistic work with acupressure and acupuncture. And I called the person up, and he said, you have asthma. As soon as I picked up the phone, or he picked up the phone. And I never heard of somebody being able to read a person's energy field so quickly, or even the fact of actually doing it at that time. So I had visited him often, and eventually he would say, you're going to do the work that I do. And he would tell me all different things. I'd be, lying out. He'd do distance Reiki healing and tell me about my energy field, my chakra. Make a long story short, he said to me one day, he said, you had a past life in Germany. And I said, and I spoke fluent German because my first was German. I learned German within 5 months. I lived there for a year. I went to school in the university. And I felt like I was home before. This was in the 80s. So to confirm what he said, there was a truth to what he was saying, but I didn't know exactly what he meant at the time. I didn't believe in past. I didn't know about past lives, as I do now. And then I wound up getting an Akashic record reading, and the woman said, you had a past life in Germany in the concentration camps. You were a doctor. And it's interesting, people called me doc. And when I was a phys ed teacher, the other teachers would say, hey, doc. And I was interested in anatomy and physiology, but I didn't understand the connection. So to make a long story short, I wound up getting a reading. She told me I was in one of the concentration camps. I was a Jewish doctor that was taken away from my family. And I was well liked, but then they had to eliminate me at the end of the war. Well, as I did a reading for myself, as I had to read the Akashic Records, and I heard similar information, and I had a German mother and a Jewish father. Skip 3 years later, I'm doing a healing for a woman through the internet via Zoom. And after the session is over, she gets up and she says, I have something to tell you. I said, what is it? She said, I remember you. I said, from where? She said, from the concentration camps. She said, you were a doctor in the concentration camps, and I saw you there. and she got panicky, and I got the chills, and I felt a sense of guilt and an eye-opening experience. It's one thing to be told information, but another thing to be in this dimension and to hear somebody who remembers you from past experience, extraneous to
Mhm.
yourself. So to make a long story short, I wound up she wound up giving me information. I told her, because she read the Akashic Records, I asked her if she'd be able to do a reading for me. And she said yes. And so in a few weeks, she got back and she said, you had a German mother and a Jewish father. You were from Berlin, which is also what I got. And you were killed in
Mhm.
the concentration camps. You were an eye doctor. You would, eventually they got rid of you. So I did past life regression. I came up with that information. I saw what exactly happened. And then skip a few years later, another woman that I'm doing an interview, a podcast, and one of the couples who do past life regression said, I think somebody's going to know you, without me even sharing my story. A woman contacted me. She said, I remember you were in Auschwitz. You were one of the doctors there who took me off the line and saved me while I was pregnant. And for that period of time, for that 2 or 3 year period of time that was going on, I had this deep sense of remorse, deep sense of guilt and shame.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, talking about the Akashic Records, how when we don't resolve these issues, we don't know why we're walking around in an energy field of something that still hasn't been resolved, but is actually gnawing at us for us to validate or recognize it. So I think part of me was asking me to validate, to recognize what happened. And I was alerted to this life because I was married to a German woman. I lived in Germany, spoke German fluently, and here I am in this life now, living this life, thinking about those years. In college, I used to dress like I was in 1942. I would wear like the shoes and the suspenders and everything else. So the reason I bring the story up is because it shows us how past lives impact our life, and how the Akashic
Mhm.
Record draws upon that information and in our energy field for us to be able to assist us to evolve, to pay attention to things that are still there, that have to be cleared. And once that
Mhm.
happened, a lot of things shifted in my life. I opened myself up to different avenues of healing, and also a lot of those thoughts and memories, that breathing issues resolved for the most part. So, in terms of
Interesting.
answering the question and looking at things, and it's all we're like a drop of water that's connected to the next drop of water,
Mhm.
and we cannot separate that, and so I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, that we're evolving, we're changing, but we're also connected to our ancestors and
Mhm.
this whole shift.
Mhm. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I just want to take a moment to say hi to a couple people in the chat. Painting the Sky Kingdom. Hello, thank you for your kind comment. Allison Yellowknee actually has a question for you, Adam. She asks, how does the Akashic Records or shamanic work help an individual who has lifelong alien contact when it follows the family bloodline? My trauma was a combination of alien abductions and family abuse.
Well, in terms of the Akashic Records and shamanic work, the act of um, going on a journey, shamanic journey, and looking at the soul's journey itself, there's information that's passed on through spirit animals, through spirit guides. As it relates to the Akashic Records, your masters, guides, ancestors, and whoever you're connected to usually pass imagery on based upon the questions that are asked. So when I do a reading, I don't know what information I'll get. It's guaranteed, but for the most part, images come through from the very beginning, the most profound conflict that a person has in their life, or with a person, or the theme will come through. And then after those questions are answered, then after that imagery, then questions are answered. So once the Akashic Records are open, this kind of information comes through. I've had clients with similar questions to what you're asking, Allison, and yeah, it's been relevant, and it's been a very repetitive and common theme to get information on alien contact, uh, ancestors, present relationships. Anything that that's relevant for the person will come through.
Mhm. Now, Allison, also, I'm reading the comments because this is also going to go out on all the audio platforms, and people won't necessarily have access to the video. So Allison also says, is the shamanic work you're connected to in sorry, is the shamanic work you connected to indigenous culture or more like a universal healing standpoint?
Well, I've learned the tradition from the Andean culture, and the teachers that I've worked with have worked in that particular area. And so for me, it's working Lalimpa, and Olympia means using an egg, using feathers, using a rattle, using sound therapy, using alcohol, clear the energy field. And for the most part, every client that I've had contact with has had a connection to their soul. They've had a sense of peace. They felt more whole. Because in essence, really what we're doing is we're retrieving the aspects of our soul that have somehow fragmented away during stress or been taken away in certain situations. And we're trying to become as whole as possible. And so my work is basically trying to do that for my client, trying to have them see their inner child, wounded inner child, the part that left, the part that doesn't want to come back, but then to try to assimilate it back in a peaceful and a healthy way so that they make the decision what they want to do. Because sometimes that part of the soul doesn't want to come back and it wants to remain fragmented. So it's a matter of allowing things to just unfold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I guess once we have a greater understanding of what's going on, um, we can shake that horrible feeling that many of us have had or still have, where we think there's something wrong with us. This sort of circles back to the beginning of our conversation about intergenerational um, trauma, because we don't know the story, and sometimes we can't go back and find out what really happened. So as a young child, we come to the conclusion that somehow there's something very, very wrong with us. We carry that through our to adulthood, and then we don't necessarily allow ourselves the opportunities that are there for everybody. I don't know if you would agree with that, Adam. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
Well, I think as it relates to our inner child, we sometimes lose the voice. Our voice, that voice is suppressed. It's told not to complain. And complaining to us eventually turns into us being a victim in some aspects as we get older, because
Mm-hmm.
we find a channel for us to then vent or to continuously speak the same issues over and over again. We have a story that we tell. So it's what's important to us is that we all face trauma and we all will go through the things that you just mentioned. But the important aspect is for us not to victimize ourselves, to exhibit self-love, or to try to open ourselves up, to give ourselves the love that we didn't receive, and to not victimize ourselves by telling a story that places us in the path of the victim. It's one thing
Mm-hmm.
to first validate things that we've done wrong, but it's another thing to use them as a means of a continuum story to keep us stuck in a certain place. But then again, when the time is right, then a person will end that story and move forward and take their power back. So I guess when the water is shallow enough to swim, the person will be able to stand and they'll be able to get to where they need to go. But for the most part, we can be, just paddling away in deep water and not know how to navigate ourselves to where we want to go. I
Mm-hmm.
hope I answered that. I hope I answered the question, if that's what you had in
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Very, very much so. I know for myself, throughout my life at different times, I got trapped in victimhood. And it was as though, and this is just a metaphor, but it was as though, when I was a child, somebody had a big stick and they were hitting me over the head with it, metaphorically. And then once I passed through that, it was like I had picked up the stick and I was hitting myself over the head. So it was just like
Yeah.
re going through it over and over and over again, when really I think the point is to discover it and just go, wow, I don't want to do that to myself anymore, and having that conscious choice to move on, to have better outcomes in life. And I don't know if I talked to you about this before. I'm not going to get into it too much today and take up all the time, but I've also experimented. I don't know if I told you on your show, when I was on your show, Adam, but I've experimented with corrupting memories. So apparently, according to psychology, when we take out a memory, usually it's not a very good memory, and then we in inadvertently embellish it, add emotion to it, and then we put it away. And the next time we take it up, and it just kind of grows in its ugliness and in its traumatic effect. So I experimented with doing the opposite, where I actually corrupted a past memory, and it was completely made up, it was completely fabricated, and I inserted it in a time in my life where I actually needed a different type of interaction with my mother. So I created this false memory that made me happy. And I embellished it, and I knew it was not real, but I didn't care. It made me feel good, and it actually helped me to warm up towards my mom. And one day I went to see her, and I'll just tell you the nature of the memory, the false memory, was her and I having these very warm tea parties where she gave me a lot of eye contact and wanted to hear about how I was feeling and how my day went. It made me feel so good. Long story short, about 6 months later, after practicing this, I never told anybody about it. And I went to visit my mom, and she asked me if I remembered the tea parties we used to have. Somehow, I don't
Wow.
know if I had changed the past or whether she was picking up on my false memory. I have no idea how it happened, but it shocked the hell out of me and really showed me the potential and the power we have over our own healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The power to manifest, the power to create a reality in time and space, restructuring the past in the present moment. We can heal the past as well as the present with our thoughts. So in terms of what you did, you were dimensionally shifting that thought and that pattern to a time that created a new reality in the present moment. So interesting. So interesting. You know,
Mhm.
you spoke about stories in terms of the victimhood. I guess it's the natural pause to beat ourselves over the head, because who else, when we're transitioning from blaming other people and then transitioning to becoming independent and saying, now it's my issue and now it's my fault. No, nobody else, I can't blame anybody. I'm too old to do that now. So then we start treating ourselves the way we were treated. And then we go on the journey of then transitioning ourselves, hopefully out of that position of then separating ourselves and then comforting and help and giving us the self-love that we need, because yeah, it's an interesting path, an interesting journey. And the subjects that you're discussing to me are so relevant, as you know, and so important for me.
Mhm. There's so much more to life than than what we're um, told by the mainstream. But thank goodness it's easier to step outside of the box, and through social media and other avenues, books, and all kinds of ways that we can discover there's a lot of other people that are stepping outside of the paradigms too. And when we do that, oh my goodness, the potential we have to inspire each other. And in my opinion, this leads us to changing reality itself. As we change ourselves, we become the change that we want to see in our world. And I think that we're a mighty force, and an unstoppable force moving against an immovable object. But I think we're making progress, and I'm pretty excited actually about it. And I was very excited to find out about your work. And your work is so user friendly. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just very gentle, very respectful, and I really encourage people to check you out and to go and follow the links below. We're quickly running out of time, Adam. So I'm just wondering, I want to give you back the platform just to share anything you want to share with the audience, the listeners and the viewers, and anything you want to tell us about what you're up to or what you've got planned, or and especially where people can find you. For those on audio, it's good for them to hear you actually say where they can find you, as well as have it in the description. So I'll just turn the floor back over to you.
Okay. So I think it's important for us to develop self-love. I mentioned before, I think it's one of the key things for us to be able to mirror that to the external world. I think when we love ourselves, we're able to love the people around us. I think we, again, reflect that with what goes on in our internal world. And so much of what we see on the external world is a mirror of what is going on within ourselves. And I think once we redo that picture, we reshape that picture, and then we do the inner work, I think the world becomes a happier and a more pleasant place for us. And as you said, it creates a shift in the consciousness of the earth. So that's my message. What I'm going to be up to is I'm completing a book, actually an extension of the documentary film, which goes into more detail of what I experienced, of the lessons I learned, what I took from the whole situation, and how it has the ramifications of helping the generations before and the generations after. So that'll be coming out probably this year. I'll keep people updated. My website is called AdamGellUniversalHealing.com, and you can obviously go on there and check out the things that I'm offering, as I mentioned. And hopefully you'll be interested in involving, which many of you are if you're watching this program. And you'll take it to the next level and become a teacher yourself and share this work with others. So thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Yes, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you'll come back and maybe we could take a deep dive into one or several of the different healing modalities that you offer humankind. It's fascinating work. And it's also very exciting to learn about the work from people that have actually done it. So you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And it really makes it so much richer, your message so much richer. So I hope you'll come back and you'll share more with us in the future. And I wish you the very best. And I want to really emphasize the listeners and the viewers to watch your documentary. The link is below. It's a fantastic documentary. It's only an hour long. It's very touching. It will touch your heart, and it will help you to just look at life a little bit differently. It's just I just loved it so much. Thank you for making that. That was a big project, no doubt. And I wish you the very, very best in your journey, Adam, and also to the listeners and the viewers. I wish you all the very, very best. Sending out much love and healing and inspiration to everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube and other channels at Karen Holton TV. Click the like button, leave me a comment, and share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you will find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton and also the Aliens and Angels podcast on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.